Hello, everyone. Welcome to our delinquency and default workshop. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here today. I know that a lot of folks would prefer to not be here today. We know that a lot of folks are struggling with their student debt. It's a tough time financially for many folks out there. And so we're here to help you understand what's going on with student loans. If you're behind on student loans, we're here to help you figure out ways to get caught up and back into good standing. So I want folks to know that there is no shame in being in default or in being here today, and we appreciate you joining us. And we're going to kick things off in just a minute, but I want to just start off with a few things here. I want to remind folks that there's a Q&A here on Zoom that you can use to ask your questions. Please feel free to ask your questions. I'm here with our team, and we're going to be working through the Q&A, trying to answer as many as we can. We're going to be dropping some links in the chat as well for folks so that you can take advantage of those resources. And so keep an eye out for that. And also, if you have a question, but you don't want your name to be listed, you can use the anonymous feature as well to submit a question, and that is absolutely okay. And with that in mind, we're going to kick things off because there's a lot to cover. And so I'm going to toss it over to my colleague, Angel, to kick us off. Angel?
Thank you so much, Sabrina, and hello, and thank you everyone for being here today. So let's jump into things since we have a lot to cover. So who we are SDCC. We are the Student Debt Crisis Center, a national advocacy organization with 2 million supporters like you, calling for fundamental reforms to student loan policies and to the end of the student debt crisis. A special thank you to our funders. This programming was funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and we thank them for their support. However, the information presented in this workshop are those of SDCC alone and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the foundation. Some quick reminders that Sabrina went ahead and touched on. Please use the Q&A function if you have a question, and we'll do our very best to answer as many questions as possible. And the information shared on today's clinic pertains to the current guidelines and rules as of today, Wednesday, October 29th, 2025. Please note that this information is subject to change, and a recording will be provided via email to everyone who registered for the webinar within 24 hours of the webinar. So what we'll cover? We will cover what is the difference between default and delinquency, how to get out of default, how to lower your monthly payment, pathways to forgiveness, and additional resources. One thing to highlight is that we are not financial counselors or attorneys. We are advocates and experts here to help. So we cannot offer legal advice, nor we could offer financial advice. The information provided today, October 29th, 2025, is based on current guidance and subject to change. Some quick federal updates. Some federal updates pertaining to defaulted loans. Collections were given the green light to resume in May of 2025. However, Social Security garnishments or offset have been suspended. Many changes due to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that was passed in July of this year will begin on July 1st of 2026. This will impact folks who have their loans in default who may need to take action before this date. Unconsolidated Parent Plus loans in default may consider consolidating their loans a few months before the July 1st, 2026 deadline. Now we're going to go over some student loan types. This is the types of student loans that currently exist. So for the sake of this webinar, we are focusing on federal loans, mostly direct loans. So one thing to flag that these loans here in blue are the ones that exist as of today. And then the direct graduate plus loan is in red since it will not be issued starting July 1st of next year. Now, the repayment timeline from the years 2020 to now. So, originally during the COVID pandemic, there was a federal payment pause in which no payments were required, which lasted from March 13th of 2020 to September 30th of 2023. On October 1st of 2023, the payments resumed and there was an on-ramp program beginning with no risk of default. And this lasted until September 30th of 2024. On October 1st of 2024, there were until now no protections, there are no protections for missed payments. And now 10 million borrowers are currently in default and more are at risk of entering default. Now we're going to go ahead and touch on delinquency and default and distinguish some differences. So what happens if I don't make payments? The first day after I don't make a payment, loans are now delinquent. At 90 days past due, the delinquency is reported on credit reports. The loan remains delinquent until missed payments are made up or a deferment/forbearance is granted for a delinquent period. 270 days after the account is past due, the student loan now enters default. 270 days equates to 9 months. Consequences of default includes tax refunds withheld, wage garnishment, ineligibility for federal assistance, etc. And there are ways to get out of default. One thing to note, if you have a $0 payment, you are still getting your account is still getting that payment. How do I put this? Like, it's still getting the payment to go ahead and be posted because you have no amount due. So if you have a $0 payment and you're not paying anything to your servicer, you are not in default if you have a $0 monthly payment. So that's something we wanted to go ahead and highlight. On also, additional things to highlight is federal Perkins loans can be placed into default after 1 day of missing a payment. What happens if you do default in your loans? First thing, the entire loan balance is due in full. The borrower can be sued, and collection and legal fees can be added, which can be up to 40% of the total loan amount. The borrower becomes ineligible for financial aid and repayment plans. The default gets reported to credit bureaus and can last on your credit report for up to 7 years. It can be sent to collection agencies, and borrowers often face harassment from collection agencies. Wage garnishment, tax refund seizure, offset of federal payment, etc., and some ineligibility for armed forces, law enforcement, or public service jobs. Now, what else can happen to my loans? At some point after the federal loan defaults, the loan gets transferred from the servicer to a default loan servicer. If you have loans in default, but they have not been moved to a default loan servicer, this is the best time for you to act quickly. Our recommendation is call your loan servicer and request to be put into an income-driven repayment plan, an IDR plan, to bring your loans out of default and back into good standing. If you are in default, the government will send you a notice about being in default and that they will begin collections to collect your debt. Now, how do you find out if your loans are in delinquency or in default? You're going to go ahead and log on to studentaid.gov. We recommend you please type this directly into your browser, as is there are a lot of scams out there and a lot of people and organizations take advantage of folks who are in vulnerable situations. So type is directly this link to your browser, and you're going to log into your account. Here you can answer questions about your federal loans or what programs are available to you. And we have the number here and the link to if you have trouble logging in or need help resetting your password. So when you log in, this would be the beginning, the front screen of your dashboard. And you will notice here in red, the red banner, that you have X amount of loans in default. This borrower has 3 loans in default. So that's how you will know if your loan is in default. If you want more details, you can click on the view details button. But before we get to that, one thing to also notice is this red box says who the loan servicer is. In this case, the loan servicer is now a default servicer, which is Texas Guaranteed Student Loan Corp. So when you click on view details, it'll take you to the next page. You could see the total amount of loan balance that exists, and you could get more details by clicking on view breakdown for a more detailed breakdown. And then here you will see who the servicer is, and you can view the loan in particular, when the payment is due, and you can pay a website to that would link to the servicer website. And then here, if you it would say if you're in default, in this case, this borrower is in forbearance, but this is where you can find the information if your loans are in default. Now I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to my colleague Sabrina to go ahead and get us started with getting loans back into good standing.
Thanks, Angel. And again, folks, I know this is a lot of information, so we're going to try and walk through it as slowly and as clearly as we can. Angel shared what default and delinquency is and all of the consequences that come with it. And so it sounds scary, but it's not that all of those things will happen to you. Those are just possibilities of things. And so let's jump right in to see what our options are if your loans are in delinquency and default. All right, so if your loans are in delinquency, meaning that they're late but not yet in default, um, it's important to note that your loans remain delinquent until the missed payments are made up or a deferment or forbearance is granted for the delinquent period. So, what are some actions that you can take? In terms of action, we recommend that you call your servicer and you can request them to place you into a deferment or forbearance. So you would give them a call and tell them that your loans are past due, that they're delinquent, and that you want a retroactive deferment or forbearance to be applied to bring the loans back into good standing. So the forbearance will be applied if you're, let's say, 3 months in 3 months delinquent. That forbearance can be applied to essentially bring your loans back into good standing. There's nothing really required of you other than to call your servicer in that case. The other possibility to bring the loans out of delinquency is to pay the amount owed for the months that you did not pay. So if your monthly payment is $100 and you missed it for 2 months, you would have to pay the $200 to make up that outstanding amount to bring your loans back into good standing and out of delinquency. And also, I want to note I dropped in the chat here a link to a one-pager that we have on delinquency and default so that you can access this information again. And then we're going to be sending out a recording and an email tomorrow with a bunch of links and information and resources that you all can access as well. So just keeping that in mind because I know this is a lot of information. Now on the next slide here, let's talk about getting out of default. So if it's been more than 270 days or 9 months in which you did not make a payment, there are options to get your loans back into good standing as well. So those four options are paying the loan in full, which we know that for most people is not a possibility. It's just out of the question. There's loan rehabilitation, there's loan consolidation, and then something else that's an option for folks is that if your loans have not yet been transferred to a default servicer, you can call your servicer, ask them for that retroactive forbearance, and then apply for an income-driven repayment plan to get the loans quickly out of default. But let's go step by step here and talk about what each of these different options mean. So to get the loan out of default, our first step for folks who are in default actually is to contact the default resolution group. The default resolution group essentially is a group in which you would contact them. They would provide you information. If you're unsure about whether your loans are in default or not, they can provide you that information, how many loans, if all of the loans are in default. They'll also identify who your default loan servicer is if your loans have been moved. It's also especially helpful if you're currently in collections. So the default resolution group is like the go-to for folks who have defaulted loans. It's our recommended first point of contact. You can start by creating an account at myeddebt.ed.gov. to try and resolve it that way. But our recommendation is to really get someone on the phone at Default Resolution Group who can walk through all of this with you and help you figure out the next steps. So you can go ahead and give them a call at 800-621-3115. Again, I would start off by contacting the Default Resolution Group. But let's take a look at the next slides here to break down what exactly the different avenues out of default are. So the first one here is loan rehabilitation, and loan rehab is a one-time opportunity. It's a little bit tedious, so I'm gonna walk through all of this with folks. If you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A. Someone from our team is gonna try their best to answer the question for you. So we're starting off with I think, a little bit more of the complicated options here. So loan rehab, you would need to make 9 monthly payments over the course of 10 months. That's what the process of loan rehabilitation is, summed up. Now, again, you must call your default servicer or the default resolution group to find out who that is to determine an affordable monthly payment amount. You're going to be asked several financial questions. You'll be asked about your income, if you're married and your spouse has income. All of those questions are going to be asked of you. So just keep that in mind when you're going through this process. There are going to be questions asked. Um, so just again, keep that in mind. So under an agreement to engage in this loan rehabilitation process, your servicer is going to determine a reasonable monthly payment amount. It could be equivalent to 15% of income above 150% of the federal poverty line, divided by 12. And also, your payment could be as little as $5 a month. That would require additional documentation of expenses for it to be super low like that. But again, you will be in contact with the servicer to come up with an amount that you would need to pay each month for the course of the 10 months. Again, our recommendation, call the default resolution group or your default servicer. You're going to need to share the income information as I shared. The servicer is going to calculate that estimated amount. The next process is they will direct you to mail or fax a copy of your latest tax return or tax transcript. If you are married and file separately, but you live with your spouse, you will also need to include their tax documents. And if your tax return does not reflect your current income or you haven't filed taxes, there are other forms that you'll need to fill out instead. So this is something that you'll need to do. But again, you'll work with your servicer, they will send it to you, and then you will need to send it back to them. We recommend that you sign and return the loan rehab agreement as soon as possible. So within 10 business days of them receiving your information, they're going to mail you that agreement, including that calculated monthly payment amount, the payment options that you have, and the terms of the agreement. However, if you can't afford the amount that they're asking you to pay, then you need to let them know. They're going to then have to ask you several more questions. You'll need to provide additional documentation so that they can review it, see if they can lower that payment for you. And then after reviewing, mail your signed agreement back to the address provided in the agreement as soon as possible so that you can start this process of loan rehabilitation. So to complete loan rehab, you'll need to make on-time payments. So after your ninth payment, the Department of Education will send a request to credit reporting agencies to remove the record of default from your account. At that point, once you've made those payments, your loans are no longer in default. However, the record of non-payments will remain. It'll still be on there showing that you had a period in which you didn't make payments, but the default status itself will be removed. And it's also important to note that I mentioned that it's a one-time opportunity, but there are some exceptions here. So if you've completed a loan rehabilitation process in the past, so before August 14th, 2008, or if you rehabilitated your loans between March 13th, 2020 to December 1st, 2022, you actually can go through the process of loan rehabilitation again. There is going to be a major change due to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act beginning July 1st, 2027. Folks will actually be able to undergo loan rehabilitation 2 times. But again, that's still a couple years away. Now, for folks thinking about collections during loan rehab. So your loan servicer may pursue collections via wage garnishment or treasury offset, so the seizure of tax refunds or other government payments. Now, it's important to note that wage garnishments, for what we've seen and from what our legal partners have seen, have not resumed yet. The department made the announcement in May saying that they were going to resume wage garnishment and resume collections. However, they've just been ramping it up. We haven't actually seen it happen. If that's not the case for you, please you can feel free to let us know. Um, but that hasn't been really happening with folks as of yet. So just keep that in mind. Um, Involuntary payments, or again, collections, if you've already resumed the collections before you engage in this loan rehabilitation process, if you're already undergoing it, they may continue even after you're making the loan rehabilitation payments. The government may still be collecting on the fact that your loans are in default. So that is something that does happen here. But those the collections or the wage garnishments or whatever it is that they're doing for collections cannot be counted towards that required 9 voluntary loan rehab payments. That's really important to note. So not only are you going to, if you're in collections, going to have to be making these payments, you will also continue to have tax refunds and wage garnishments occur during that period. Now, if wage garnishment has not begun or collections have not begun when you enter the loan rehabilitation agreement, it will not and it should not start once you enter that rehabilitation. So if it hasn't started and you begin this loan rehab process, you are essentially safe from collections starting against you. If it did start, it will continue, at which point, once you reach the 5th payment, you can request that the collections be stopped. At that point, you can call the default servicer and say, I've reached 5 on-time payments for loan rehabilitation, and I'm requesting that the collections stop. So that is hopefully a bit of relief for folks. Now, again, once you've made the required 9 payments, your loans will no longer be in default, which is a positive. Now, a really big piece to note here is that if in the future you plan on consolidating your loans for some reason, let's say you have a Parent Plus loan that's in default, but you want to consolidate it in the future in order to enroll it in an income-driven repayment plan, you may want to consider skipping loan rehabilitation and instead consider applying for a loan consolidation, because a loan consolidation can also get your loans out of default. And if you need to do it in the future, it just might be a more straightforward, more simple process here. So again, to quickly recap loan rehabilitation, we recommend that you start off by calling the default resolution group to identify who your default loan servicer is and whether your loans are in default. You will need to share income information with the default servicer so that they can identify a monthly payment amount for you for the loan rehabilitation process. They will then send you an agreement in which you would need to sign and send it back to them. And then you would need to make 9 monthly payments over the course of 10 months. If your loans are in collections, you can call at the 5-month mark to request an end to collections. And once you've gone through this loan rehabilitation process that we just described, we do recommend that folks consider enrolling your loans in an income-driven repayment plan if they're not already enrolled in one, to lower your monthly student loan payments. We've seen it be the case where a lot of folks who are in default are not enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. You are in the standard plan, which tends to be the most expensive plan. And so there is a possibility of you lowering that monthly payment, and we're going to discuss soon what plans are available to you. Now, another possibility to get out of default is loan consolidation. Now, consolidating your loans is a process of converting or combining your loans into a direct consolidation loan, essentially creating a new loan. So, which loan types can be consolidated? You can consolidate a single direct loan, a single FFELP, which is a federal family education loan, a single Perkins loan, or a single Parent Plus loan. And you can also consolidate multiple loans. So if you have multiple direct loans or you have a direct and a FFELP, you can consolidate all of them together. The important thing to note is that a single direct consolidation loan cannot be consolidated on its own. It would need to be consolidated with something else in order to be consolidated. So that would not be an option for you. If you have a single direct consolidation loan, you would need to look into loan rehabilitation as your way out of default. In addition to consolidating and bringing the loans back into good standing, you must either agree to repay under an income-driven repayment plan or make 3 full on-time payments before consolidating and enroll the loan in the repayment plan of your choice, which does not have to be an income-driven repayment plan. The really important thing to note right now is due to the current regulations, if you consolidate your loans, you may erase your repayment history by creating a new loan. This may extend your payoff date and reset your IDR credits at 0. So if you've been in repayment for 10 years, but you're in default and you choose to go ahead and consolidate the loan, you are creating a new loan, which would start your repayment clock over at 0. So just keep that in mind. But for some folks, it may benefit them to consolidate and start over at 0 again, versus staying in default and undergoing wage garnishment, tax refunds, being seized, and other collections practices. So it really is a personal decision as to what option you want to pursue here. And then we just have a couple of visuals here for you to understand, again, the loans that can be consolidated. So a single Parent Plus loan, a single direct loan, a single FFELP loan, or a single Perkins loan can be consolidated into a single direct consolidation loan. And if you have multiple loans, in this case, someone might have 2 direct loans and a Parent Plus loan, they can all be consolidated together into a direct consolidation loan. Now on the next slide here, a quick reminder that if you have a single direct consolidation loan, it cannot be consolidated again into a direct consolidation loan. So you will need to explore loan rehabilitation or another option to bring your loans out of default. And if you want to apply for a consolidation, you can do so online or through a paper application. We have seen that a online application has been processed way more quickly than a paper application. And if you want to consolidate your loans to enroll them in an income-driven repayment plan, you were able to submit a single consolidation to take both actions. So you'll be able to consolidate and enroll the loan in an IDR plan at the same time. You can do so at studentaid.gov. It's also worth noting that processing times for a consolidation can take anywhere from 30 to 90 days or even more to process your application. And while all of that is being processed, your loan should be placed into a processing forbearance during that time, meaning that you should not be billed. You will be in a sort of holding pattern as they process and figure out the next steps with your loans. Now, again, just a reminder that this may extend your payoff date and reset your IDR credits at 0. Now, for folks who, again, are weighing their options of loan rehabilitation versus loan consolidation, let's take a look here at the benefits that are regained through both processes. So, both loan rehab and loan consolidation allow you to regain eligibility for deferment. So, in the future, you can apply for a deferment. Loan rehab and consolidation regain eligibility for forbearance. Um, for choice of repayment plans, again, both options allow that. Eligibility for loan forgiveness programs regain that ability through both programs. Eligibility to receive federal student aid, again, is regained through both of those processes. Now, the removal of the record of default from your credit history is regained through loan rehabilitation. So if you go through loan rehab, they will remove that record of default from your credit history. Now, if you go to consolidate your loan to get out of default, that record of default will not be removed from your credit history. And if we're looking at interest and collection costs that are added, um, for loan rehabilitation, that benefit is not regained. For loan consolidation, that is the case where interest and collection costs are added. Loan rehabilitation will not add those, the interest and collection costs. So just a couple things to keep in mind as well when weighing your options. All right, with that, I'm going to toss it over to Sabrina Ashley. And then a quick reminder to folks, feel free to use the Q&A. You can submit anonymously. We're here to answer your questions.
Awesome. Thank you. So we've gone over two different ways to get your loans out of default and back into good standing. And we've also gone over how to get your loans into good standing if you're a delinquent. So let's go over some student loan repayment options so you all know what comes next. So here's a layout of the current repayment plans. We have the standard plan, which can also be called the level plan. Some servicers use that terminology. Then we have fixed alternative plans like the graduated repayment, extended repayment, and extended graduated repayment plan. Those three repayment plans all are a little bit different, but basically they two of them will give you payments that kind of start smaller and then end larger. So they may be beneficial to some folks if you can't afford high payments now, but you can afford them maybe later. And then we have income-driven repayment plans. We have ICR or income contingent repayment. Then we have income-based repayment, old and new. We have pay as you earn. And then we have the SAVE plan or saving on a valuable education. And it's important to note right now that not everyone is eligible for income-based repayment or pay as you earn. And then also no one can apply for the SAVE plan any longer. Okay, so we're going to focus on income-driven repayment plans today because those are the most feasible plans for most people. So let's get into it. The benefits of IDR plans are plentiful. So basically, the monthly payments are calculated as a percentage of your discretionary income, and it's based on your income and family size, not the loan amount, which is why it's typically more affordable than the other repayment plans like standard and the alternative plans. The monthly payments may be more affordable than the standard plan, and that means that it can help prevent default and delinquency. So it can definitely help people who might be experiencing default and delinquency right now kind of avoid that situation in the future. It also helps folks with lower incomes, those who may have lost a job or have decreased incomes. It's important to note that you don't have to have an income to be on an income-driven repayment plan. You can still, quote, certify that income and then get a $0 monthly payment or close to that. When we talk about IDR plans, we talk about earning credits, which are qualifying payments, and that has to do with the timeline of repayment. So some IDR plans require 240 credits, which equals 20 years of qualifying payments, and others require 300 credits or 25 years of repayment. And periods of default and many types of forbearances and deferments do not count towards IDR forgiveness. And that's including the SAVE forbearance that's going on right now, if anyone joining us is on that. And then loan forgiveness is possible after payments are made between 20 and 25 years, depending on the plan. And then this is just a clarification here. We get this question a lot. What is the difference between IDR and IBR or pay, ICR, save? So IDR, income-driven repayment, is the umbrella term that is used. It's the category and the name of the whole program. And then IBR, ICR, pay, and save are all types of IDR plans. So this is a short breakdown of what the different types of plans are. We have a breakdown of the discretionary income and the timeline to forgiveness or repayment. So you can see that different plans have different benefits of um, the monthly payments and then the repayment timelines. And it is important to note right now that income-based repayment will soon be offered to those who don't qualify or who didn't qualify previously due to hardship requirements. And that is due to the early implementation of the OBBBA that's expected to become available this upcoming winter. So definitely keep an eye out for that. Okay, so income recertification, this applies if you are joining us and you are on an income-driven repayment plan right now, then this might apply to you. And if you are just thinking ahead, then this will be important information to how to maintain that income-driven repayment status. So every 12 months, or every year, you need to be recertifying your income. And this is when you provide updated income and family size information so that they can reassess what your monthly payment is. This can be completed by filling out the paper application or the IDR application online, which is recommended typically. Right now, income recertification isn't required until February 2026 at the earliest. Again, if you are in a an IDR plan right now, you might have gotten a notice from your servicer saying that you don't need to recertify until even later. That's fine. Just follow what your servicer is telling you. Again, ideally, you should be recertifying every year. We suggest every 11 months because your recertification is due actually 10 days before that 12-month mark. So to avoid any tight deadlines, we just suggest every 11 months. And if your wages decrease or you become unemployed, you can recertify your lower income at any time to secure lower monthly payments. So that is another huge benefit to income-driven repayment plans, that you can recertify your income at any time. So if you are experiencing a hardship, then make sure that you are kind of staying on top of what is going to benefit you most when it comes to your monthly payments. And then this bottom screenshot here is just a little image of what it would look like if you're a returning borrower going to recertify your income. You'll just go to that returning IDR borrowers section instead of applying for an IDR plan all over again, just so that you can avoid any of that extra paperwork. Okay, so IDR and taxes, this is typically a big question for folks. So in terms of tax filing, married filed jointly is where both incomes are going to be taken into consideration. However, if you're now separated or divorced or you can't reasonably access your spouse's current income, the Department of Education is not going to factor in your spouse's income or loan debt when calculating your IDR payment. And then for those married filed separately, that's when your spousal income is not considered. An important date here is December 31st, 2025. That is the end of tax-free student loan cancellation via IDR on the federal level, unless it's extended by Congress. So if you reach the threshold in 2025 and have your loans forgiven in 2026, you should not be taxed. And we're just putting that there in case anyone on this workshop is close to forgiveness. And then a note here about IRS integration is that that has resumed on IDR applications. So if you provide consent, the Department of Education can pull your income information on the online application from last year's tax filing. But again, you should always manually recertify your income every 11 months. Okay, so how to identify monthly payments on different plans. You can do the loan simulator, and that's going to be found on studentaid.gov. The con here is that it might show inaccurate results for plan eligibility and monthly payment amounts. This is because it's just hard to know when it's working right. It's a tool known for having periods of downtime or inaccuracy. Calculations for the standard plan should be pretty accurate there, and it is a good tool for folks to use if you don't have time to call your servicer and wait on the phone. So that's definitely something to consider. You can also call your servicer. This is going to be more accurate information regarding plan eligibility and the monthly payment amount. The con here is, of course, the long wait times that we all hear about. If you do choose this route, you'll want to make sure to ask what repayment plans am I eligible for and what are the estimated monthly payments. And it's important that if you're working towards PSLF or public service loan forgiveness, that you should specify, that you want to maintain eligibility for PSLF. So that means that they should be giving you IDR plans or the 10-year standard plan for estimated monthly payments. And then another thing that we don't have on this deck yet, because it is so new, is that there is an tool by EdCap that you can use. I think someone from my team can drop that in the chat, where you can drop in your student loan information and see your different payments calculated on income-driven repayment plans. Um, Keep in mind that this is a newer resource, but we have seen it work pretty accurately for several borrowers. So that can also be um, something to use or play around with if you're looking to get your loans back into good standing and kind of understand what your monthly payment or finances are going to look like in the future. So what to know before applying for an IDR plan? You're going to need your permanent and your mailing address, your family size, and then if you don't opt into that IRS integration, you'll need to provide income documentation. So you can choose one of these, whether it's a W-2 or a bank account statement or a pay stub. And then a note here is that you must know what plan you want to enroll in. Since the lowest monthly payment option no longer exists on the IDR application. So again, using those tools that we talked about on the last slide can be really helpful for thinking about your next steps and applying for an IDR plan. So how do you actually apply for an IDR plan? You can apply for one online or via paper application. We recommend the online application at studentaid.gov/IDR. And again, we will be sending a list of resources in an email after this webinar. A note here, if anyone on this call has been waiting for their application to process, if you applied before March 2025, you submitted an application requesting that lowest monthly payment option, or you applied for the SAVE plan and your application is still pending, you should consider resubmitting your application due to all of those processing delays. We have heard that those applications just may have been lost. And then how long does it take to process an IDR application? Can take anywhere from a few days to a few months to process your application. Right now, again, there are massive processing delays. We have seen that applications that opt into the IRS integration have been processed much faster than paper forms or online forms where you just submit your income documentation. So if you are willing to do the IRS integration, that is recommended. And once you apply for an IDR plan, you should be placed into a processing forbearance once you submit your application. You should not be billed while your application is being processed. And if you are not placed into a processing forbearance, you can call your servicer and demand to be placed into one. Okay, so again, what if you can't afford your payments? If you have checked your IDR eligibility options and you still can't afford the minimum monthly payment, if you are looking to get your loans back into good standing, whether you're delinquent or defaulted on your loans, these are two options for you if you still can't afford your payments, a forbearance, or a deferment. So a forbearance allows you to temporarily stop making monthly payments or temporarily make smaller payments. There's usually no progress towards forgiveness or loan payoff during a forbearance, so you do need to keep that in mind. And then interest will accrue. Um, and in a forbearance, you may choose to pay the interest during the forbearance. For a deferment, this allows you again to temporarily stop making payments. Interest accrues on some loan types during a deferment, and there are different types of deferments with specific eligibility requirements and forms. So you will need to actually apply for a deferment. And this is because it's for specific situations like cancer treatment, economic hardship, graduate fellowship, rehabilitation training, or maybe unemployment deferment. There are several different types of deferments. So the difference between forbearances here. There's a hardship or discretionary forbearance, and this is typically used when struggling to afford payments. You'll need to apply for this forbearance via mail, online, or on the phone with your servicer. So basically, this forbearance is not automatic. And you can just call your servicer and say, I need to be put into a hardship forbearance. Interest will accrue, and time spent in the forbearance, again, will not count towards IDR or PSLF forgiveness. There's the save administrative forbearance. This was an involuntary forbearance. There was no application. So the 8 million people who were enrolled in SAVE were automatically placed into that forbearance. No payments are required during this time, and interest did start accruing as of August 1st. And on the SAVE administrative forbearance, you will not receive PSLF or IDR credits for time spent in the forbearance. And then we have that processing forbearance that we were just talking about. And so folks who apply for an IDR plan are placed into that until your servicer processes your application. You're supposed to be automatically placed into it. Again, if you're not, you can call your servicer and demand to be placed into one. This can last up to 60 days. Um, up to 60 days of this forbearance will count towards PSLF credits, but the processing forbearance might last longer than that. So if it does last longer than the 60 days, that extra time will not count towards PSLF credits, and then interest will accrue in the processing forbearance. Okay, that was a lot of information. And for some folks on this call, that might have been a lot of future information. Again, we are doing a bunch of workshops and we don't plan to stop doing those workshops. So definitely come back and see us for more information as you're going through your processes. But right now, we're going to do additional forms of loan forgiveness and cancellation. So we have the total and permanent disability discharge, which provides full forgiveness on your federal student loans if you are totally and permanently disabled. You must provide documentation from either Veterans Affairs, Social Security Administration, or a medical professional. There's no longer a 3-year income monitoring period for TPD. And then borrowers qualify if they have a mental or health condition that is experienced or has lasted 5 years and is preventing them from getting, quote, substantially gainful employment. So if you think that this could apply to you, there is a lengthy application, so definitely look through that and make sure that you can get the materials together for that. But it can be definitely worth it in the end. Other types of forgiveness are, of course, public service loan forgiveness, borrower defense to repayment, which is when you were maybe defrauded by a school. There's teacher loan forgiveness, death discharge. This is when basically saying that your loans will not transfer to anyone when you die. There's closed school discharge, unpaid refund, false certification, and then there's Perkins loans forgiveness as well. So a quick recap here. Forbearances and deferments are two different ways to temporarily pause monthly payments when borrowers are struggling to make ends meet. There's hardship discretionary forbearance, a processing forbearance, and the save forbearance, and they are all different types of forbearances. I believe we dropped this loan in, or this link in the chat for you to find more information about forbearances and deferments. Um, if you don't make any payments for one day, you're considered past due and delinquent. If you don't make payments for 90 days, it's reported to credit agencies, and then 270 days past due means that your loan is going to be in default. Consequences of default include loans being sent to collections, which did officially restart as of May 5th, 2025. However, we have not seen collections agencies really start that process. And then the government can use its collection powers like tax refund offset, wage garnishment, or federal benefit offset. And then additionally, you could be ineligible for federal mortgages, small business loans, federal student aid, and other benefits as well. And then loan consolidation and rehabilitation are the two options to get out of default, and we can drop this link in the chat as well, and it provides a very good breakdown of the differences and benefits to those two different processes. So, what can you do right now? Well, you should make sure that you know who your student loan servicer is or your default loan servicer and have access to your account on their websites. You should be saving any communications, documentation you've received from your servicer, including default and/or collections notices. And then you can print, download, screenshot, and save any information that details how many PSLF and IDR credits you have, if applicable. And then a note here, Parent Plus loan borrowers, if there are any of those on here, if you would like to enroll Parent Plus loans in an income-driven repayment plan, you'll need to consolidate Parent Plus loans before July 1st, 2026, and enroll the consolidation loan in an IDR plan before July 1st, 2028. So that could be applicable to you if you whether you have a Parent Plus loan that's currently in good standing or you need to get it back into good standing. If you have any issues or complaints, you can contact your representative's offices. We have a casework tool that we can share in the chat. You can also contact your state AG office, local state student loan ombudsman, if your state has one. You can also head to your servicer website and use the chat messaging functions, or you can call them or email them. And then you can also contact your local legal aid organization to see if you qualify for free help. And you can find your local legal aid or legal services agency at lawhelp.org. And we can also drop that in the chat as well. So, a warning against debt relief scams. Typically, we see scams out there that will offer maybe a loan consolidation or debt forgiveness in exchange for a fee, maybe upfront fees, or that someone's claiming to be the Department of Education, or they promise the loan forgiveness. This is a horrible practice. You should not have to pay for advice for your student loans unless you are contacting a legitimate lawyer, a student loan lawyer, if that's your choice. Then they, of course, may charge a fee, but no one should be approaching you offering to forgive your loans for a certain fee. And then we've also seen some bait and switch practices, including immediate loan forgiveness or deadline approaching type of messaging. And then again, if you refinance your student loans with a private lender, you will lose access to all federal student loan benefits and programs. So some people do choose to do that, but then they just keep in mind you are losing access to the benefits that we did just talk about on this webinar. So if you are interested in those benefits, then you might want to consider not refinancing your student loans with a private lender. If you'd like to continue getting any updates from us, you can definitely head to our website, studentdebtcrisis.org. You can follow us on social media. We're at debtcrisis.org on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Blue Sky. We are always posting the latest actions we have going on and sending out emails several times a week, updating folks on what they can do to take action, and then also how they can keep their loans in good standing, as well as making sure that they have the latest updates. Here is a lengthy list of resources. We will be including this in the email that we send out to folks, so don't worry about screenshotting this right now. And I think we have a few minutes for questions. Sabrina, did you see any that stood out to you?
There's been a few different questions here. I wouldn't say that there are any frequently asked questions, but I just want to let folks know that if we did not answer your question or you have any follow-up questions that come as a result of watching the recording or just something that comes to mind after you think about all of this, feel free to send us an email at info@studentdebtcrisis.org. Again, we're a small team, so we're going to do our best to answer in a timely manner. But we want to make sure that if you are in default and delinquency, that we help you bring your loans back into good standing. So if you're uncertain about whether your loans are in default, I saw a question about that. You don't know if you're in a default, if you're in a forbearance or anything like that, you can send us an email and we'll share some links to you that you can use and some tips to identify that information. As Sabrina Ashley said, we're going to send out the recording, send out an email tomorrow with all of this information so that you can access it again. But other than that, I don't think there were any questions that came to mind. Any that you had, Sabrina Ashley, that you saw?
Um, I think maybe one is an important one that I did see. Someone asked if they're starting. I know there's a lot of, we've lightly mentioned that there's the one big beautiful bill that's coming into
Mhm.
play shortly. And someone did ask if they're starting rehabilitation now or thinking about starting that. Will they still be able to get into one of the current IDR plans that we talked about today when they get out of rehabilitation, or will they be stuck with the wrap plan that is set to kick in?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So that mostly depends on your loan type. Now, if you have a direct loan that's not a Parent Plus loan, you will be able to go through the loan rehab period or process and be able to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan like IBR or ICR. However, with Parent Plus loans, it's a little bit more tricky because those loans need to be consolidated into a direct consolidation loan in order to access income-driven repayment plans. So if your loans that are in default are Parent Plus loans specifically, and you engage in a loan rehab process, you are going to miss the deadline of July 1st, 2026 because July 1st, 2026 is the cutoff date. So your loan needs to be issued before that date. So you would need to consolidate well in advance, probably around like May, to have your loan consolidated, and your new consolidation loan would then be eligible to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan. But all of that would need to be done before that July 1st, 2026 date. And because loan rehab is over a 10-month process, we wouldn't cross that. We wouldn't finish the process before that deadline, if that makes sense. And I know that's very wonky and really hard to understand and also to explain. So if you're in that boat where you have a Parent Plus loan that is in default and you have questions about what's going on and with that deadline of July 1st, 2026, and what your options are when it comes to loan rehab and consolidation, you can shoot us an email at info@studentdebtcrisis.org, and we want to make sure we walk you through it and share all of the resources and information that we have.
Yes, perfect. We are also going to be continuing these webinars, so we'll definitely be in touch with additional opportunities to come to a reconciliation specific webinar, which will answer all of those complicated questions as well, because it can definitely be confusing.
Exactly. We're going to do our best to break it all down for you folks. But again, I just really want to thank my team for being here. I want to thank all of you for being here, for taking time out of your day. Keep an eye out for the information that we're going to be sharing with you tomorrow, exactly 24 hours after this webinar wraps up. And so keep an eye out for that. And again, thank you all so much. Send us an email if you have questions. And if not, I wish everyone the best of luck, and we'll be in touch with other webinars coming up soon. Take care, everyone, and have a great night.